North America. Oh, and there goes the recording.
Pause.
You know, the people who watch this are going to miss the whole intro. They're not going to have any idea what I'm talking about.
We were waiting for it to loop and it finally went in.
Spalting. Catch up later. All right. So interestingly, historically, even though zone lines are the most commonly the most common type of spalted wood used was that blue-green color. That's from elf's cup fungus, which is a chlorosoboreous species. Nope, I lost there we go. And so now we're going to look at a whole bunch of different marquetry and intarsia works from about the 1400s to the late 1600s from Italy and Germany, so Western Europe. And so what's important to note is, so these are woodcuts. And so they're tiny little pieces of wood that are glued up to make a larger image. And if we go back and we think about this time period, they didn't really have science, right? They didn't have chemistry, they had alchemy. And so their ability to make different colors was entirely based upon what they could find in nature. They had a really hard time synthesizing pigments. And a blue-green color was very hard to do. They didn't have a way to do that would actually persist with time. All the ones that they had oxidized or they faded or they mutated to different colors over time. And so some enterprising person at some point went out into the woods and found elf's cup stained wood and realized that it was a very, very stable color. And in fact, that's one of the reasons that science is so interested in spalted wood, is that those colors are very stable. They don't degrade in UV. They don't move with water. You know, they make excellent dyes and colorants because of this. But it also meant that they could use them for these very fancy panels that were put in churches and castles and things like that. So I want to just take you on a journey through some of these artworks because they're absolutely beautiful. And everywhere you see this blue-green, that's elf's cup. So that's chlorosoborea. So here you see them in the saints' robes, but also here through this paneling, this is meant to imitate marble. And what it is shavings of that blue-green wood from like a hand plane crunched up together with blue to make it look like real marble, but it's spalted wood instead. Here's a church. And again, I'm sorry, normally I could tell you what it is and where it is and when it was built, but that would be in my notes, which I cannot see right now. But this is a large panel. This would be in a church. And if you look down here, you can see the blue-green being used in these panels for the sky. You're zooming in on one of the panels, you can see it through here. So what's interesting to note is most of these panels would have been very brightly colored when they were originally done. And the only color that's still there is what's from spalted wood, which should give you an idea of just how durable these pigments are over time. This is the very famous Mailander cabinet. And so it's a decorative traveling cabinet. And you can see the elf's cup being utilized in these little areas right here. But again, so these are all very tiny pieces of wood cut together to make these more geometric images. You're zooming in on just a little part. There's that fake marble again. Those little bits of green shavings glued up in order to make it look like marble. This one is in here because it's a really neat look at a different kind of spalting being used. So here we have, again, elf's cup. But as you can see here, in order to give the appearance of either waves, crashing, they use zone line wood as well. So it's not that zone line wood wasn't used historically in art. It's just A, it was common, so it wasn't that exciting. B, black is not a color historically anyone has had a difficult time making. And C, zone lines, if you'll recall, tend to be because two fungi have come together and they're usually white rots. And so the destruction and the softness of zone line wood makes it very difficult to work with. Whereas the pigments tend to be sent out before the fungus goes, so that wood tends to be a little bit more sound. This is, I believe, the Prince Room in Castle Velthorn. Every single one of these panels is a marquetry. And every single one involves spalted wood. So just the entire scale of this is incredible. So we're going to look at just a few of those ceiling panels. Here's one of them. So here you can see, here's elf's cup down here in the ground, in the grass. Here's that fake marble. Yeah, if you're at home on your computer, you can just like get real in there. Here's one of the ceiling tiles. You can see it here in the leaves. Here, I love this image right here on the tablecloth because it shows you one of the ways you can tell if it's spalted wood versus if it's a synthetic. First is the year. They didn't have blue-green as an actual reliable pigment until the late 1600s. But also look at the color variations. You see how the tablecloth is kind of green and yellow and kind of blue in places? That tells you that a fungus did it, right? Because the fungus is just slowly secreting this pigment. It's not going to very evenly go into the wood. And one of the ways that when I go into museums to check for things is I look at how even the color is. Dyes usually uptake pretty evenly and only change in their uptake with the anatomy of the wood, whereas spalting pigments go where they want. Because the fungi do what they want. And that's kind of what makes it such a fun and chaotic material. Here is another fancy cabinet. And here we can see all of these little panels have elf's cup in them. We're going to zoom in. Here's a zoom in on one of the doors. Again, the detail, remember, they were doing this all by hand, right? With little tiny fret saws. So you can see the elf's cup and some of the clothes up here. I think that's a bird in the corner. Now we're going to zoom in again. Here's just a close-up of one of the little areas. These, not quite sure what they are, but their pants/legs have elf's cup in them. This is a panel from a church, and it's a beautiful parrot. Here you can see the elf's cup. There's that blue-green, and then more of the green color. Elf's cup makes between a blue and a green, depending upon how long the fungus has grown. So the green has been used for the leaves, and then the bluish area has been used for this parrot. This is really interesting. So this is from Germany, and it's from a tiny little church. And when my co-author and I for the Spalted Wood book were looking for examples to put in there, spalted wood is so ubiquitous across parts of Germany that most people don't even realize they have it in their churches. And for a while, it was just the dominant thing to do. And so it's really hard to go anywhere in parts of Germany, especially Western Germany, in those churches and not find at least one panel that has spalted wood in it. So the nuns were just like really confused to why Hans, who was the guy who took this photo, was so excited. They didn't know what it was. It was just on a little pulpit. And we got really excited and they were confused, but it's a beautiful bird. This is another nice example here because we've got the blue-green down here in the bushes, but then we've got a blue stain up here in the sky. And that's from, if you guys have ever gone to a lumber store and you've seen they sell like denim pine or blue pine, things like that. That's from some ophiostomatoid fungi, ceratocystis, those types of fungi. And they make that sort of grayish blue streaking on wood. This is one of the few examples I've seen of it actually being used in historic art, but it does make for a really nice stormy sky. This is a really neat cabinet. Again, the elf's cup can be seen here in the leaves. We'll zoom around to the side. Here's the top of it. One of the studies, I got a grant a few years back from the World Wood Day Foundation, and it was to look and see if I could find spalted wood in historic art in places outside of Germany and Italy. And one of the big places I was curious about is Spain, because there was a lot of travel through there. And I do a lot of work in South America. And South America has a lot of Spanish colonization. And so I was curious to see if spalted wood had traveled through Spain and then maybe made it to South America. And the stuff that I found, this was found in Spain in one of their museums. Unfortunately, all the spalted wood pieces we found in Spain were made in Germany and then just either bought or brought there. This is another cute little cabinet. Again, by now, I think you should probably be able to see the spalted wood, right? That blue-green in there. So we're getting later and later as I progress through these chronologically. And so you start to see more and more colors staying because science got better and better. Which is important because why don't we see blue-green spalted wood being used in our work today? Eventually, by the late 1600s to early 1700s, chemistry was actually beginning to pull apart from alchemy, and the ability to actually synthesize colors that stuck around got a lot easier. And so if you could synthesize or find a way to derive a blue-green pigment that would stick around, that is so much easier than having to go out into the woods and find a decayed piece of wood and figure out how to cut it and not break it apart. Spalted wood is hard to work with. It's a giant pain in the rear. And so the second the guilds could ditch this technique, they did. Just looking at that box again. Another cabinet. This is one of my favorites. I love this cabinet. You can see on the parrots. Parrots were very common for that blue-green. Nice little tine of grass here. It's a gorgeous parrot. Another nice bird here. I love the detail in here. The little flecks on the breast are spalted wood as well. So what's interesting is just as we're spalted wood's starting to fall out of favor, we're hitting into the 1700s, we're moving through the 1700s, you see it less and less because it's just not economically viable. So it's starting to fade from public perception. And then we get the Industrial Revolution in Europe. And so guilds and traditional guild secrets, guilds go by the wayside, guilds disband and things are mass produced. And so the secret of spalted wood more or less dies with the guilds because there were only a few guilds that actually knew how to work with the material or what it was to begin with. It died for so long that museums honestly just thought that blue-green was a dye until the 1990s. That's when the first paper came along where a couple of researchers, one from Germany and one from here in the US, actually took samples of the backs of some of those marquetries and realized that that color had come from elf's cup. So outside Western Europe, don't see a whole lot of use of spalted wood. It happens on occasion, mostly the zone line stuff. I have looked though. So this is an English table from right around the 1600s, if I recall, and it looked really promising. However, if we really zoom in, can you see how really even that color is? We zoom in again. That's a very, very even, stable amount of color. And these little white bits, those are the wood rays. So those are the cells that most cells in a tree run up and down. The ray cells in a tree run in and out. And the ray cells are the tree's lunchbox. That's where all the easy free food is. So the first thing a fungus does before anything else when it gets into wood is it raids the fridge. So the ray cells are always the first things that get color. So on a piece of spalted wood, the rays are darker than the rest of the wood. Here, the rays are lighter than the rest of the wood because they're not the path of least resistance. Dyes will take the path of least resistance. So this piece is a dye job meant to look like spalted wood. So too bad for England. In South America, this is really interesting. So I get a number of grants with the Chilean government to help work on help get their wood turners used to like handicrafts and spalted wood markets and things like that. And I have looked for a lot of native spalted wood use there because they have a ton in their forests. This is a carving from Easter Island, Rapa Nui, and it uses some zone line wood. So it is used, it's just not, the material isn't necessarily understood to be spalted wood. It's just a cool material. Another nice carving, this is by another native Chilean with elf's cup. They have a lot of elf's cup wood in Chile. Although this is a picture I like to put in here. I bought every single machete in the town of Valdivia, Chile, when I did my last run there. So this is a picture of me actually buying out every single machete to go do fungal foraging in Chile. What's interesting is with all of that spalted wood, all over Chile, why don't we see more use of it? Chile has a lot of German settlers. You would have thought they would have brought more techniques over. It has a lot of natural spalted wood. Why does it not have more actually used in art? And it's because of this really cool urban legend they have, which I got to find out about while I was there. So here on this picture, I'd like you to meet the Trauco. The Trauco is a tiny little like gnome man who doesn't have feet. It's very important that you notice that he does not have feet. He walks on stumps and he's supposed to be hideously ugly. However, any woman who sees him is compelled to sleep with him. That's just the magic of the Trauco. And this is how it's been the Trauco. She was wandering in the woods. She couldn't help herself. It was the Trauco. It's a lovely story. But when I was doing one of my talks in Chile and taking people out into the forest, they brought back some Elf's Cup and they were like, well, you know, we were always taught to not touch this as children. And I was like, oh, why? Why can't you touch the blue-green wood? And they said, well, it's trauco poop. So there's this sort of like urban legend mythology surrounding spalted wood, at least in Chile, which has kept it from being utilized large scale, which I thought was really interesting. And before you laugh, North America has plenty of our own urban legends about spalted wood. They just tend to be more, you know, hey, let me tell you how my buddy makes spalted wood. He takes it into the forest and he drinks a couple of PBRs and then he grinds up reindeer antlers and does a dance under the full moon. Like, we have our own urban legends. They're just a little different. So, history. You did good. I'm going to check the questions here real fast before we move on to actually looking at the fungus. Let me see if I can get the chat up. All right. Oh, just one. All right. Molly asks, how exactly do they incorporate spalting in their art? Do they extract the pigment? Molly, are you talking about now here in the United States or historically? In fact, actually, I can answer those both. Historically, and for the most part now, people find spalted wood in the forest and they cut it up. There are very few people who actually extract the pigment. That's a very modern technique that my lab developed, and we're going to talk about it a little later. Now that you have an appreciation for the art, let's talk about the actual fungus. Oops, try that again. So one of the most aggressive white rots that we have is turkey tail, Trametes versicolor. I'm sure you're all familiar with turkey tail. It's everywhere, worldwide distribution. And it's just a very aggressive white rot. It bleaches wood. It pairs really well with winter polypore, Polyporus brumalis, another white rot. And these two grow at about the same speed. And so they tend to put up a medium thick zone line when they meet each other. So they're really good for beginning spalting because they just get those nice lines every time. But turkey tail can pair with a whole bunch of other white rot fungi to also make zone lines. And if you get strains from different regions, usually they'll make zone lines because they're genetically distinct individuals. It's just a really aggressive fungus. Now, if you don't want to try and find two different fungi to make your zone lines, you can always get dead man's finger. And this is a really neat little ascomycete, right? In that it mutates so quickly that if you had a Petri plate and you put two colonies on it, by the time they met each other, they wouldn't recognize each other anymore and they'd put up a zone line. So this is a great one to have because it makes zone lines with itself. It's just constantly making zone lines all over the piece. And so you get nice, big, fat, black zone lines with just a little bit of white rot without having to do too much work. Ah, the color. The color should look very familiar, right? This is Elf's Cup. We have two species in North America, Chlorosoboria aeruginosa and Chlorosoboria aeruginosa. And it's very hard to tell them apart, and it doesn't really matter because they both make the same blue-green. They're very, very tiny little cup fungi. They tend to open up more after a rain, and then sometimes they desiccate down, and so they're really hard to see. The wood is brilliantly blue-green underneath, so it's a lot easier to find the wood than it is the fruiting forms. Here's another look at them. They have white hyphae first, which goes blue-green after a short time. It's another close-up. They're impossible to mistake for anything else. There's no other fungus that is quite this color. And I thought, this is a student harvesting. I thought I had, there we go. So here it is in the wood. Sorry, this student cut that piece. I teach students. I give students machetes and send them out into the woods to find spalted wood. So here it is in the wood, that nice blue-green color. One of the interesting things about these photos that I'd like you to look at is the relative, there's not a lot when you look at them, right? So when you look at those pictures, those marquetries that I showed you, the bowl on the first slide, it looks like very rich. There's a lot of pigment going on there, but that's actually very rare. It's far more common to just have a little bit of a vein of spalted wood. You really have to hunt and find stuff that's stable enough to use and that's dark enough to use out in the wild. So I want to show you just some sort of other colors in the wild. Got some orange here. Here's some red zone lines. Here's a nice purple. Again, these are just tiny little amounts of pigment. Here's some more Elf's Cup. This is in a tree in Chile. A red zone line again. Some of these are from the Amazon rainforest of Peru. I do quite a bit of fungal hunting in Peru. They have a really high species diversity, so you can find some really cool colors there. Some oranges. This is a really nice picture because it shows you kind of the differences in saturation. This is a much more common amount of Elf's cup to find in something. It's just a little vein about this big. This is in Chile over here on the right. This entire log was blue-green and it was sound. I've only seen about 3 logs like that in my entire life. 2 were in Chile and 1 was in Ontario, Canada. That's gold right there. In fact, historically, spalted wood was worth its weight in gold because it was so rare. Here's a red one. The red is even more rare to find in this kind of vein. This is also in Chile. I have seen this in the United States. This is from Cytilidium cuboideum, which is flaming dragon fungus. And it doesn't make a macroscopic fruiting form. So I don't have any like mushroom pictures to show you. The color is very specific. It's most commonly found in utility poles. It's a irritating mold for a lot of woodworkers in wood that's in service. You don't see it in the home really because it's a wood decay. What's really interesting is it's not very strong. It's not very competitive. But once it's established, it's really hard to get rid of. And so I don't see it too often in large patches, except I used to live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And there was this one, husband and wife duo, and they had built a little log cabin. And somehow they had gotten a colony of Cytilidium cuboideum in their plot. And all their downed wood was bubblegum pink. All of it. Like this whole forest was just, it looked like a fairy tale gone wrong. And they thought it was hilarious. So they bought a shingle mill and they just turned all their downed wood into wood shingles for their house and shingled their house in pink shingles. And it is a house that I think about to this day as like, it's a very Hansel and Gretel-esque type of thing. And I can't wait for some urban legend to come out about them. They were incredible people. So it does happen. It's just not super common. Some brown zone lines in a nice honeycombing pattern. Some sort of a salmon color with black zone lines. And it's a little bit more rare to get color and zone lines together. That's something that if you want it to happen and actually be sound, you kind of need to induce yourself. So tiny little pieces, very hard to get color and zone lines together. That's what you find in the wild. Let's talk a little bit about modern spalting, but first I see another question has popped up. How do you put it all together? Glue. Molly, are you talking about marquetry? If so, they take a little saw and they cut little pieces out, and then yeah, they glue it in a little frame to make a larger picture. All right, modern spalting. So now that you have some understanding of that, take a look at this piece again, right? We have some understanding of what we're looking at. Get Molly out. All of these colors, all of these zone lines in something sound enough to make a bowl out of, this is where the science comes in. Spalting is, at its heart, the art of pissing the fungus off, because spalting is a stress response. So happy fungi don't spalt. So if you want fungi, so if you go out and you pick some fungi and you want to turn, this is a piece of sycamore or elm, I don't remember anymore, it's been a while, and you want to turn it purple. You can't just take a purple spalting fungus and stick it on the bowl and hope for the best. Because unless something antagonizes the fungus or makes it think that its resources are limited, it's generally not going to produce any pigment. So you, as the spalter, have to figure out a way to piss the fungus off enough that it produces pigment, but not so much that it dies, right? So it's always a balancing act. And then in order to get something like this, to get all these different interactions, it's not that you put all these fungi on at once, they just kill each other. You have to put them on one at a time and wait, right? So the white rot goes on first for a couple of months, and then you dry the bowl to kill the fungus, and then you get it wet again, and then you put the next fungus on. And so a bowl like this can take multiple years to do because of the layering effects of the fungi. So that's like a lot of time, and I don't have that kind of patience. Also, I have a lab. So one of the things that when I first got into the science side of spalting, so I started as a woodworker and a wood turner, which is what I was classically trained in. My undergraduate degree is in woodworking. I've been a woodworker my whole life. My specialization is in wood turning. I do a lot of sculpture work and I only work with spalted wood. So after my undergraduate degree in woodworking, here we'll go back to this picture for a minute. In woodworking, I was kind of upset with how little I actually understood about the material. I could work with it, but I couldn't understand it. So I did a master's and PhD in wood science. And so that's where I really dug into the science of spalting. And then I did a postdoc in spalting, and now I am a professor of wood anatomy, and I just research spalting all the time. One of the neat things about having a lab is that you can look at the compounds that are actually being secreted and figure out what's going on. One of the most frustrating things about spalted wood is that beautiful blue-green color, Elf's Cup, right? Takes years to get in a log. I mean, one of those logs completely colonized, that's like a decade or more of actual colonization. No one has time to wait for that on an art piece. And if they did, there's not enough money in the world for me to sell it to you. So one of the first challenges was, how do we get more blue-green faster? So if spalting is the art of pissing the fungus off, the first thing, the easiest thing to do was to piss it off in a Petri plate. Because what normally happens is you put a little bit of Elf's Cup on the Petri plate and it grows about a quarter size and then it's done because it's very slow growing. So the very first thing I did was I put wood chips in the Petri plate that had white rot on them. They were sterilized, but the chemical signatures were still there. So this freaked the fungus out and made it produce a whole bunch of pigment, which is great. But then I had blue-green wood chips on a plate, which is not useful. But you can hit those with a solvent, and the pigment drops right out. But not an easy solvent, right? Because if it was an easy solvent, they wouldn't be good pigments. So water doesn't do this. Ethanol doesn't do this. Acetone doesn't do this. You have to use paint stripper, dichloromethane. You can also use chloroform. I do not recommend using chloroform. It ends badly. So if you hit it with DCM, the pigment drops out. Then you can concentrate it kind of as you will. And this works out really well because now you become the fungus, right? So pigments in particular are usually sent ahead of fungal growth, and they move through the wood as they will. So when you extract it out of whatever you've grown it on and you just drop it onto the wood, it still moves just like it would if the fungus had released it. You're now the vector instead of the fungus, which is an absolute delight. It's also meant that we can basically do fungus in a jar, right? Pigment in a jar. These are all spalting colors from all the fungi you've already seen. The neat thing is this represents just 3 fungi. So I told you all that I go right to Peru and Chile and I do all this research, and I kept thinking, all right, we got to find purple fungus and we got to find like a yellow fungus and we got to find all these fungi. So we brought back all these fungi because we found them all over the world, brought them back, sequenced them, and it turned out they were mostly the exact same ones we had in North America because they make different colors based upon their climatic conditions and stress level. So a lot of these fungi have worldwide distribution. It's just maybe they're red here, but in Peru, they're purple because it's a different climatic environment. So a lot of my research then is, all right, so how do we get Mr. Red to become Lady Purple? Like some of them, like this red one in particular, goes blue with the wrong kind of music being played in the lab. And that's very frustrating for my students because I had a student who really liked Coldplay. It doesn't like Coldplay. It likes Michael Bublé Christmas. And so he pissed it off. And then we had to listen to Michael Bublé Christmas for 2 months. It wasn't okay. No one was okay. So just taking a look at these fungi here. So this is Cytolithum cuboideum, flaming dragon fungus, and it starts off orange and it goes to red, and then it goes to blue, and then it goes to purple. Elf's Cup is a blue-green mix. We know that one. And then there's golden mango fungus, which is another one of our big ones. And it starts off yellow, and then it goes to this sort of olive. Then it makes a very unattractive brown, which I am not showing you. And then it goes to purple, and then it goes to kind of like a wine red color. And that's just all based upon concentration. So this is the fungus this is the pigment in solution. So this is it in paint stripper. If you flash off the solvent, what you have is just colored glass, right? Because the pigment's sticky. It doesn't exist in a powdered form. That's not how it works. It just binds to whatever it's on. That's why it's such a good compound. And so it's really nice to ship because it's just stuck to glass. It'll stick to Teflon. It sticks to everything. For the chemists out there, if we have some chemists, out of these, there are three fungi, right? Three main fungi that we use. There's the red one, Cytilidium cuboideum, flaming dragon fungus. There's elf's cup, the blue-green. And then there's the yellow, golden mango. Golden mango and elf's cup are both porous films. And we're going to look at them under SEM, which is scanning electron microscopy here in just a minute. The red one, which is what you're looking at right now, that's flaming dragon fungus, is a naturally occurring naphthoquinonic crystal. It's only the second one ever found. And it makes these massive, like star flower-shaped crystals with these horrible jagged little edges on them. It's so large that we had a hard time getting it identified because it was too big for all the machines meant to identify crystals. So take a look at all its little spikes here. Its color changes based upon how long the crystal gets and how it forms. So this one in particular can be carried in acetone as well. If you carry it in acetone, you tend to get more of the blues and purples. If you carry it in dichloromethane, you tend to get more reds. And that's just based upon how long the crystal can form. The slower the solvent evaporates, like with acetone, the longer the crystal chains get. There's those little hooks. This is elf's cup. It's a porous film. This is one that we have used to make photovoltaic cells out of, so solar batteries and things like that. Its color is based upon how many layers you put on and how many of those little holes get filled. And this is golden mango. It's the same. It's also a porous film. So I actually got an NSF grant a few years back to look at these for renewable energy. There's a lot of stuff you can do when you have fungus puke in a jar, as you might imagine. You can use it to color paper. This is paper pulp with flaming dragon fungus. This is a student project. They made wallpaper. So they went around and they collected a bunch of paper scraps and then they pulped them back up and they dyed them. That's elf's cup. That is flaming dragon fungus with dichloromethane. That's flaming dragon fungus with acetone. And this is, you can't tell in this picture, but that's a little bit yellow. That's golden mango fungus. They make great textile dyes. And in fact, we got a grant from Walmart to look at them as actual textile dyes. This is looking at elf's cup on a couple of different fabrics. Here's flaming dragon fungus on a number of different textiles. Note that it's different colors on different materials. That's because of how quickly it can dry on different things. Interestingly, things that are notoriously hard to dye, like polyester, actually dye really well with the fungal pigments, which is interesting. We were able to successfully turn it into an ink. This is flaming dragon fungus, and it was printed with an inkjet printer on a piece of cotton. So maybe in the future, you'll wear mold. You never know. I know there's in every mycological group, there's always people who love to dye fabrics with fungi. So this is a look at surface of polyester fibers after dyeing with two different methods here. What's interesting here is that normally when we think about dyeing textiles, we think about getting the color in the fibers. That's not how this stuff works, especially with the red. It makes those crystals and wraps around the fiber. So it's a very different type of bonding. And this is showing just again, the changes in the color you get. And this is with flaming dragon fungus, polyester versus cotton, and then with different types of solvents. Now, take a look at this. Look at all the overlaps of the crystals on there in order to get a color change, right? That's just crystal after crystal after crystal after crystal. You can also, and this is interesting, carry the pigments in natural oils, especially raw linseed oil. And so that offers a way to get them into paints, oil-based paints, and various types of decking finishes. And so this is a color swatch of looking at using the pigments in natural oils. There's another one with looking at the different colors on the different textiles. And then for the real nerds, this is voltage characteristics of xylindin, which is the pigment from Elf's Cup versus on amorphous films, just showing that, yes, in fact, we can make solar cells out of fungus puke. Putting them in natural oils, we tested it in terms of decking finishes. And what's really interesting here is you can see, so this is Seri Robinson, so that's Elf's Cup. Some of these here, these are aniline dyes, just as a comparison. The color, it decolorizes in the oil, but even though it decolorizes, which is good because you don't really want a Barbie Dreamhouse pink deck, even though it decolorizes, the protective properties of the pigment prevent it from UV degrading, which is really cool. I'm trying to be mindful of our hour. I think I'm pretty good. We have some time for questions still. I want to talk to you a little bit about the main website is northernspalting.com. There's so much information on there. There's videos, there's pictures, all kinds of resources. My lab is entirely crowdsourced at this point, which is great. People from all over the world help contribute to our research. So if you're curious about getting your hands on the fungi or the pigments, or you just want to support the research, there's a Patreon, patreon.com/spalting, and you can join the Spalting Cooperative and be a nerd just like us. There's also, oh my gosh, so many books, so many books. So if you are into all the old art, you can't get enough old art filled with spalted wood. There's Spalted Wood, The History, Science, and Art of a Unique Material. It's like, it can double as like a murder weapon. It's a huge book. It's a beautiful coffee table book. If you want just the facts, ma'am, I just want to spalt my own wood and don't give me any of that old art, Spalting 101 is your friend. And maybe you're kind of into the wood side of it. You know, maybe you like a little wood science. This one is about wood in the home and how to deal with like when mold gets on wooden toys and things like that. And if you really like art, this one talks about the studio wood turning movement, which is important because, again, spalted wood became popularized again along with the studio wood turning movement. So it's a really interesting to watch their progression together. Now it's time for questions. Oh, there's one in the chat already. Since some pigments are polar acetone solvent, have you tried changing the pH and if that affects the color as well? So thus far, we have not really seen a lot going on with that. I have a paper on it somewhere. pH changes the color very momentarily, but then when you put it on wood, it changes right back. And so it doesn't end up being an effect that's super useful, sadly, over time. It does do it in actual solution, but the second it's out of solution, it changes back. Who else has questions? That was a lot of information. Come on, guys. I know you're there.
Can we try questions from the room?
I want to ask her something.
Oh, there's Linda coming up behind. All right. See if that works and pick up on the mic. See if that works.
Is it working? Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, I just wanted to know what wood is the most, we wanted to go find some. What would we look for? Where, what kind of wood, where would we look? Is it on old stands of fir or conifers, or is it just hardwoods?
You can find spalted wood anywhere. You are more likely to find the pigments and white rots in hardwoods, especially hardwoods down by a source of water. And you are more likely to find bright colors in conifers.
Well, the only one I saw that had a fruiting body was Hyperborea. Is that the only one that puts out mushrooms?
Are you asking if the only color producing fungus that puts out a macro fruiting body is Elf's Cup?
That has a fruiting body.
Lots of spalting fungi have fruiting bodies. They just tend to be the white rots and the zone liners. Remember I showed turkey tail, winter polypore, dead man's finger.
And those put out the black lines, in that black marble.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up.
The black marbling line is what the white rot.
I can't hear the question. It's breaking up really bad.
Well, are we just wondering if there are other mushrooms that put out color, but that actually put out not just the white drop.
Bright colors, the fungi that put out bright colors, the only one that makes a macroscopic fruiting form is elf's cup. The rest you have to find just in the wood. There's a question online from Kevin. Any solar technology in develop utilizing these pigments? No. And the reason for that is right now using rare earth materials makes much better solar cells. So it's going to be one of those natural things are not going to be used until we've used up all of the rare earth stuff. So talk to me in 50 years when people actually care about the technology because we've used up everything else. Then yes.
Good question over here.
If you're gonna dye this a standard like large shirt,
I can't hear.
If you're gonna dye a standard woman's large shirt, how much dye would it take?
That would depend. How much would it take to dye a woman's large shirt? It would depend on what color you're trying to do. Because some of the colors are layers of other colors. So if you wanted to do just like red with flaming dragon fungus, I don't even know. It would, you put it on in layers. It's not just like a dunk dyeing. So it would probably take a couple vials. You'd have to thin it out really well. It would work a lot better as like a tie dye, honestly, because it's never going to be even, right? Like we saw in the pictures, spalting is very blotchy because that's their natural pigments. And so when I think about trying to like dye a t-shirt, I can't even imagine the time that would take. Whereas like something like a tie dye would work a lot better because then you expect it to be blotchy.
We have
Any of these
pine.
Pigments are edible.
Okay. Any of these pigments edible?
They're not edible. We've done toxicological testing on them and they're all like, we couldn't even make an LD50 for Elf's Cup because it binds so well to everything. We couldn't even when you do early stage toxicological testing, you get these like glass well plates, right? And you put the pigment in, the solvent evaporates off and the pigment binds to the glass and then you raise little zebrafish embryos in them. And however many mutations or whatever they have or how often they die, you can get LD50s from. So we couldn't even get an LD50 from Elf's Cup. So go to town if you want to lick it. And then flaming dragon fungus, the LD50 was around like table salt. And I have to tell you that I don't even know how you would eat enough of it to get to that level because such a tiny amount makes so much pigment. And in order to get to it, you'd have to have it in a solvent. Like you can't like chew it off of glass. Whatever you were eating to get it would kill you way before the pigment would. We have a question pending.
the tree that you showed, how to glue that without like interrupting the color?
I'm gonna need questions repeated. I can't hear them.
In creating the wood art, when they inlay the colors, how do they put it in there and adhere it without the glue affecting the color?
So that old wood art are chunks of wood, right? So they're pieces. So the glue just goes on the back. It's like if you hung a children's picture on the wall with tape, you can't see the tape from the front, right? Because it's on the back.
Here in the Northwest, though, parts of the dry area, they have pine blue stain, which is a different fungus, and the foresters don't like that. Have you guys worked with that pine blue stain fungus yet?
I mean, yes, we've definitely done a lot with all of those ophiostomatoid fungi. They're just really common. So people tend to get really used to them, but they get sold under the blue pine thing. And if you go to like Home Depot, you'll see they're actually marked up because now they figured out if they call it denim pine, they can sell it for more. So some people do like it and will pay more for it. You just got to find the right market. it mixes really well with other colors. And so you can put flaming dragon fungus on a piece of blue pine and get purple pine. So that's really fun. I've got a couple of questions in the chat. Molly says, I'm sure you already said this, but I don't understand how or why the fungus benefits from the wood. Why does it inject its pigment? What did you say the pigment was again in terms of the fungus's lifestyle and health? Spalting is a resource capture strategy. So the zone lines are like fences. They block off part of the wood. So one fungus can stay on one side and one fungus can stay on the other, and they can't get at each other's resources. The pigment is toxic. And so other fungi can't grow across that pigment. So it's a way for them to hold like a whole log so they can take their jolly sweet time growing and eating it. They're just resource capture strategies. Kevin asks, is this Elf Cup film pigment a renewable solution to manufacturing photovoltaic cells? In the rare case, earth minerals are no longer available. Kevin, yes, it worked. It just didn't work as well as anything synthetic that's on the market. So again, in a couple of decades, you know, we're going to have the best solar cells because nothing else is viable. Anything else?
As well as a mushroom enthusiast, I'm a rock hound, and you have kind of made me think about some of the petrified wood I'm picking up. Is it possible that some of the color changes or maybe the spalting lines themselves are visible in the petrified wood that I have collected?
I have seen zone lines in petrified wood before. So yes, the pigments probably not. Just like decay weathering would probably make them not visible anymore, but the zone lines are very durable.
Anything else, Linda?
No, I just wanted to. Thanks a lot for your talk, and are there other, if there's any other questions? How are we doing on time? We have,
We are 20 more minutes to 8.
okay, good.
Did she turn that one bowl there to the screen and red?
That bowl with
Well,
that
that's-
green and
yeah,
red,
turn
first,
that.
her main one. First.
Yeah.
What's the question? Sorry, a couple people were.
You also look at that main bowl again that has all
Did
those.
you turn that?
Yeah.
Really? Wow. The very first, your first photo.
There
That-
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one. That
Yeah,
one.
I'm a professional wood turner. That's actually how I make most of my like income. So
Wow.
we can, if you guys want to see, I can show you other pieces.
How big is that one? How big is that?
It's like 12 inches, maybe. It's
Wow.
Do you
not.
have a name for that one?
It's called Legacy. I did this as a collaborative work with Mark Lindquist, who's very well known in the woodworking sphere. Give me just a minute. I'm going to pull up stuff from my most recent gallery show.
Because that bowl showed, if you look the way I was looking at it, you can see a goose throwing his head back and looking at you.
Let me see if I can share these. Open.
What is
Open
it?
together. There you go. Okay. So now we're going to do this fancy thing where I share this. So this was my last gallery show. It's been a while because of COVID, right? So I had a big solo exhibition open February 2020. So it was open. It was supposed to go for like 6 months and it went for like a month. It was very disappointing. The title was Intersections, and it was a look at a lot of different ways wood and science intersect and how life intersects. And so these are the pieces here that were in the main catalog. So when you go to gallery shows, usually there's like a catalog you can take with sort of the main pieces in them. So this first piece is a large wall hanging. It's about 2.5 feet across. It's made from a single piece of oak, Oregon white oak. The brown comes from beefsteak fungus, Fistulina hepatica. It's also figured wood. That's why the grain looks so weird. And then it's been bleached out in areas by turkey tail. So it's huge, like it's massive. It hangs above my fireplace. It's about the size of a fireplace mantle. And then, can you guys see the change? Did you see the change in pictures?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. This is just a little thing. And it I think it's just a piece of maple, just very like sort of craggy piece. And I wanted to make it look like, I think the title is called Broken Pottery. And I just wanted it to look like just like this really old like urn that you would find at like an old dig site. And so Elf's Cup, along with the zone lines, really made a nice look like that. And so these are all, I do a lot of pigmentation now after the fact. I'll do the zone lines in white rot through long-term inoculation. And then I will do coloring after the fact, just to kind of speed things up. And it allows me to really concentrate in areas where I want to show more highlights. This is the same piece of wood. This piece is called Budding, and it's just like a really crappy piece of poplar that I just tried to kill me so many times. And eventually I won, and it's not too big. It's, I don't know, maybe 10 inches tall by 10 inches across. But in the end, I thought I was going to throw it out. And then the longer I sat with it in my living room, the more I was like, you know, with the zone lines and the way the grain has teared and just how the blue stain has come through, it ended up being a much more dynamic piece than I thought it would. I had a huge piece of that oak, and so I had a number of pieces from it. And this one is, I don't know if you guys know much about wood turning, but it's usually one side is turned and the other side is like kind of round or flat. So this is inverted on the other side. So what you see on this side is like pushed through on the other. So it's a complete inversion on the other side. So one side is turned and the other side is hand carved basically to get there. And so again, that's a beefsteak fungus, Fistulina hepatica with the brown, and then turkey tail with the right in this sort of like very gentle curvature that moves through. And so it's gentle curves on this side. And then it's just like this really jagged protrusion on the other side. Then this one, this is just a bowler hat. I called it, it's because my daughter's name is Scout. It's called Scout's hat. Because one of the big things in wood turning is cowboy hats. I hate cowboy hats. It's like everyone's like, so have you turned your first cowboy hat? I'm like, I don't want to turn a cowboy hat. So people kept asking me about hats. So I turned a bowler hat, which I was much more into, and then gave it, you know, little feathers here in the front. It's a little fancy feather in the front of the bowler hat. And this was just a really tiny little funny little bark ball that I had some sort of native white rot in it. It's just a little piece of maple. And I just put like a really delicate lilac, and that's from golden mango fungus on there just to give it a little bit of movement, because it.
Aww. That's why we couldn't record it either.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Yeah.
I think she just stopped.
Got a lot of people.
Dramatic pause. We can't hear you or see you. I don't know if you can hear us.
In this. And so I really enjoyed that. People put them in places I did not expect. Oh, there's another question. Is this lab extracted pigment added to your woodworking? So it's just a combination, because there's no difference, right? Whether the fungus does it in the wild or whether they do it in my lab and I put it on, it's the exact same thing. So some of them are found pieces of wood. Some of them are ones that I put the fungus on and let it grow. Some of them are ones that we grew the fungus in the lab and used the pigment on. It's just sort of a mismatch of what worked for me at the time. Questions?
Good.
I said, does it keep spreading when you put it on a piece of wood then?
No, without moisture, the fungus dies. So the second the wood is dry, everything's dead.
So if you find it on a dead piece of wood, the pigment will be gone.
Yeah, it's shot. I mean, the pigment's still there, but the fungus is dead. You're not getting any more. That's an awesome hat. Thanks, Kevin. I thought so.
Trying to think of the other
Yeah.
light fungus.
People were saying while I had that quick break that they found spalted wood in Eugene. Or is it?
Yeah, pretty much anywhere where they got lumber on, you're gonna end up with some spalted wood.
If you've got lumber on the ground, you get spalted wood, huh?
It's harder to keep wood from spalting than not. Like zone lines and white rot are just, and blue stain, just a fact of life.
Wow.
Less over here, it's dry.
But it gets really, it rots the wood, right? So it makes it soft and unusable.
To a point, early stage, it's not unusable. It's just a little bit more permeability. Blue stain wood is allowable in building codes here in the United States. So most of your interior of your wood frame houses has blue stain lumber in it.
What was that big burn down there, Eugene? Was it Holiday something? Oh, that's all blue stain. They cut that dead standing timber down and it's all blue stain.
Where is it? What is it? It's a place.
It was all the dead timber from a big burn down. Holiday, I just. moved.
One of the fires is you're talking about?
Yeah, that's exactly right, yeah. And
You
all
know
that's
about that?
blue stain, not all of it, but it doesn't have commercial value to the people that build it, so the color. I think it's pretty.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. You guys aren't too far, so you're welcome to come visit the lab anytime. We'll give you a nice fungus tour.
Yeah, field trip. Yeah. It's only 4 hours away. but-
Hey, I will take you on the forage of your life. We have a school forest up here.
You do, that's right.
Machetes for everyone.
Yeah.
What'd you think?
Where's your labs?
I'm in Corvallis, Oregon.
Are you at the college?
Yes, I'm a professor at Oregon State.
And that's where your lab is?
On campus.
Yeah.
On campus, okay. Anything else? No? All right. Well, thank you very, very much. So that was really fascinating. Nothing
Absolutely.
I did not know. So those are, the mushrooms you listed, like at least I have found, I think, the ones that have fruiting bodies. I think we found every one that you've mentioned. Well, not the ones from maybe Europe, but yeah, are there other? Those are the main color ones that you've mentioned, and
Yeah,
none
but-
of them we would find.
There are thousands of fruiting spalting fungi. So yeah.
Huh. Thousands. Okay, well, things to learn.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.